So I think we're live. Yes, we are live. We're doing a Bible study, CVS and friends here. How's it going, everybody?
Noise. Good.
Good.
Yeah, good.
The boys. Who's leading and how are we going to start this first episode?
So I don't know who's leading or whatever. Maybe we could take turns reading. I don't know. I don't know how y'all want to do that, but I figured sort of the structure that at least I've been doing. Usually when I do Bible study, I just go verse by verse, and then obviously questions arise along the way. There's certain things that can be drawn out from the scripture, and of course, because of our being from different traditions, we can talk about potential differences, agreements, maybe even things polemically that we disagree with Protestants on. But
yeah, it would be fun to have a Protestant in here. It would be fun to have a Protestant.
It would be
in
fun. It would be fun. We should get one. But I don't know. This is kind of like a test run, I guess. But Bible study is always good. So even if it sucks, it's still good because we're reading the Word of God. So it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
If it's not, good or whatever.
Yeah, and we're at the maximum capacity right now for my software is 4 people. So if like for every other week, if Aidan can't come because he's nursing or whatever, we can bring in Rebecca from Bread of Life or something.
Oh, that would be awesome, dude.
We'll see how it goes.
And if I were to be replaced, I would like it to be with Rebecca. So.
Yeah, I still haven't talked to her.
Because she's awesome.
She's cool.
Yeah, she's cool.
I hope I didn't annoy her because I sent her that video that Nikola sent me. how to be a Christian.
You know, it's funny. I think why I thought of her too, though, is because I felt like she would be able to not let the humor bother her so much and to just hear the argument. I trusted that that's how she would take it, hoping it wasn't offensive, but I think she would take it good.
She was friendly with me. I went on one of her. She was a guest on someone's live stream, and I said hello to her, and she said hello back. She seemed friendly, so I don't think it annoyed her.
Okay, good.
So let's do the Bible study. Let's jump right into. Are we going to start with Matthew?
Yeah, why don't we? I thought it'd be cool to start just from the first gospel of the New Testament.
Do it.
Yeah. Okay. So the gospel according to Saint Matthew. Chapter 1, the book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac the father of Jacob, and Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers, and Judah the father of Perez and Zerah by Tamar, and Perez the father of Hezron, and Hezron the father of Ram, and Ram the father of Amminadab, and Amminadab the father of Nahshon, and Nahshon the father of Salmon, and Salmon the father of Boaz by Rahab, and Boaz the father of Obed by Ruth, and Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of David the king. And David was the father of Solomon by the wife Uriah, and Solomon the father of Rehoboam, and Rehoboam the father of Abijah, and Abijah the father of Asa, and Asa the father of Jehoshaphat, and Jehoshaphat the father of Joram, and Joram the father of Uzziah, and Uzziah the father of Jotham, and Jotham the father of Ahaz, and Ahaz the father of Hezekiah, and Hezekiah the father of Manasseh, and Manasseh the father of Amos, and Amos the father of Josiah, and Josiah the father of Jeconiah and his brothers, at the time of the deportation to Babylon. And after the deportation to Babylon, Jeconiah was the father of Shealtiel, and Shealtiel the father of Zerubbabel, and Zerubbabel the father of Abiud, and Abiud the father of Eliakim, and Eliakim the father of Azor, and Azor the father of Zadok, and Zadok the father of Achim, and Achim the father of Eliud, and Eliud the father of Eleazar, and Eleazar the father of Mathan, and Mathan the father of Jacob, and Jacob the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom Jesus was born, who is called the Christ. So should we stop there and dig into that a little bit? So I'll just say first that genealogies are super boring. And so the tendency, at least for me, when I first started reading the Bible, was to just kind of like gloss over this kind of stuff. I think that, I don't want to project, but I do feel like that's probably a habit of some people, especially Christians, who maybe are already familiar with the importance of the Davidic line and how it's important to establish that not only did Christ come through Abraham, but that he directly came down then through the Davidic, kingly line. So even the fact that St. Matthew starting off with the book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, he's mimicking Old Testament prophets He's mimicking patriarchs. So the genealogy of Noah, this is the genealogy of so-and-so. This is the genealogy of Abraham. This is the genealogy of Adam, et cetera, et cetera. So he's starting that right off the bat to show like this is an important person. This is not just somebody that we're talking about. This is somebody that has merit and credit in the world of salvation. And then he's starting it obviously from back in Abraham, who the promise was to Abraham's seed, that salvation would come into the world. So that's the first point that I think is important. The second one that's interesting is that there are two women that are named right off the bat in the genealogy, which is highly unusual for ancient genealogies because women were basically not even considered. They were basically considered a little bit higher than cattle. I mean, you didn't reckon somebody based upon who your mother was. In fact, the woman was she was identified by who her son was. So the fact that Matthew not only names two women, but also women who one was a prostitute and one is a sinner is pretty amazing, because it shows that God, through his sovereignty, through his mercy, through his goodness, can actually work righteousness out of that. So those are the first couple notes. I don't know what you guys think.
So I want to add that. So I read it's Tamar, Rahab, and Ruth. And Ruth is the only one of them that's not like naughty, but she's also a Gentile. So like the woman in that genealogy with like, besides Mother Mary, of course, with the place of honor, is Ruth, who has that cute little book in the Old Testament. And thanks to Father Mike Schmitz in the Bible in a Year podcast, I just finished that a couple weeks ago. That's really cool because it shows the inclusivity of of the heavenly kingdom, and reaches out to sinners and non-Jewish people.
Yeah, it shows right off the bat too that the whole plan of salvation, whether you're talking about going back to like Isaiah or Jeremiah or one of the other prophets that talks about the Gentiles coming to worship the God of Israel, it's showing that this was already basically a thing. We already see the grafting in of Gentile peoples throughout the Old Testament. So yeah, those are definitely good points.
We also what do you think, David? Too, that go ahead. Nikola.
No, you go ahead.
I had one quick point, which is just that when atheists try to say that Jesus was not a historical person and it's all just make believe or whatever, I do like the genealogies for that reason, that it grounds everything in the context of history. And so over against the atheist claims that it's mythology or it's just a bunch of lies, not every character obviously in the Bible can be verified by extra biblical sources, but a lot of them can, and they hang together in this web. So that's just a point that I always take away from the genealogies.
Yeah, absolutely. And also to that point, like if you're going to make up a genealogy of Christ and you're going to try to establish some type of fake messianic figure, why on earth would you add some of the people that you've added to this list? It doesn't make any sense to add somebody that's not only a sinner, but that it also even has people in it that are like men, for instance. Like notice it says too David was the father of Solomon by the wife of Uriah. It's pointing out Bathsheba, but it's saying like this is actually lawfully the wife of somebody else, and David had relations with her. This is a messy line. So to point out some of these people, it's like, well, why would they even tell this unless it were true, the way that this happened? Because it doesn't look credible. It does look credible by the very fact that some of the people are seedy. So why add it unless it is actually true?
And apparently that was done purposely too, because like it was prior to Solomon's birth that these like really nefarious things happened, and they did that as a talking point so that if anybody tried to say, well, look at Jesus's family line, it's sinful, you could then say, well, you didn't disregard Solomon, you didn't disregard David because of the sinfulness in the line there. So that was used as like a polemic in favor of Jesus, and so it's I don't know. I used to hate the genealogies as well, just because the names are so bizarre and out there. But
I think they're fun.
they can be.
I think they can be. Imagine naming your kid some of these things.
I like
be kind of hilarious.
but I think it's pronounced Beseemeth in one of the Old Testament chapters. But I'm like, whoever like said like this is it like oomph and fud.
This is a
This is a good name.
I like Shealtiel. What is that?
Ugh.
Has L
Really
in it
rolled
twice,
up.
doesn't it? Oh, Shealtiel. Okay. It's probably the
Shealtiel.
power of
Yeah.
God or something. Or... What
Yeah,
about
it's got
Nikola?
L
What
in it,
about our
so-
friend Nikola? What's he got to say here?
I was gonna say you could continue reading. I have nothing to add on this. You guys said it all. So, yeah.
So we're in verse 17. So all the generations from Abraham to David were 14 generations, and from David to the deportation to Babylon, 14 generations, and from the deportation to Babylon to the Christ, 14 generations. So just a quick note on that. Obviously, we know that what numbers are pointed out in the scriptures. It's not just like some weird woo-woo kind of, esoteric thing. There is numerical significance to, a lot of things in scripture. We understand something as basic as the number 7 being a number of completion or fullness or perfection. And the 14, 14, and 14 is basically 3 sets of, or is really 6 sets of 7. Right. So you get the 14. So you get 2 in each generation, 2 sets of 7 in each generation. And then Christ is after the 6th set of 14, he's the number 7 on top of the 6th generation. So he would be the 7th completest generation. So all of the generations afterwards from Christ are then part of that 7th or fullness generation that Christ is basically the head and the top point of. There's other points too I've heard before too. I don't know how, because I don't speak Hebrew, but apparently David's numerical like name in his what's that called? What's that called when it's like the word has an equivalent, like numerical numbers have equivalents to letters and stuff. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I do,
Forgetting.
but I don't know what.
Well, we
Yeah.
call, we
Well,
call
anyway,
it we call it numerology in the West, but the Hebrews have a special name for it.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I guess David's the three consonants in that name are actually like DVD. So it's the that's the numerical equivalent of 14 supposedly too. I don't know if that's true or not, but I did hear that
Kieran,
somewhere. I've written about it.
Your Catholic RSV study Bible has actually, I think if you turn the page, I believe
it's
there's
got a lot of stuff on it.
a little bit of commentary that broke that down.
Oh, it even says David is the 14th name in the list. The numerical value of David's name, 3 consonants in Hebrews equals 14. I think I heard that before from Father Stephen DeYoung, who's an Orthodox priest who does Bible. He's an ex Reformed preacher, but he's a Bible scholar. So I think it might have been from him that I heard that before, but this is saying the same thing. It also says the 42 generations from Abraham to Jesus correspond to the 42 camps of Israel during its wilderness journey to the promised land. That's pretty cool. Anyway,
I wanted to add one thing about this, which is in terms of rigidity versus flexibility in genealogies and the significance of the names that are listed and the names that are omitted, particularly from Adam to Abraham. In terms of young earth creationism and the timeline and just how far are we from Adam and Eve in the garden, I'm very comfortable with a loose and flexible use of genealogies where it's not a rigid thing. Like God is not being rigid because God's a poet. Basically, God's creative and God knows what is meaningful and what is not. And it doesn't present a problem to me, although I've heard old Earth creationists and theistic evolutionists argue that the genealogies can undermine any sort of reliable timeline I just wanted to get you guys' feedback on that in the context of what we can call, for lack of a better term, young Earth creationism. What do you guys think about the genealogies in that context, just briefly?
Well, if we're talking about, so I think in Luke it goes over maybe it's in Luke, goes over the genealogy from all the way back in Adam, or is that Mark? I don't remember. But either way, the one that does that. So some people say too, because I'm a young Earth creationist, so some people like to take the ages, for instance, of the first people, like Adam living to be 900 and something years or whatever, to kind of like span a gap of time that explains why there's only so many generations mentioned. For me, I don't personally, I don't fall into that camp of interpretation. I would take the age of Adam and all subsequent people as being literal numbers. And then in terms of like the actual omissions and people that are included, why they're included, I don't know. God knows why that was the case. Matthew obviously has his reasons, apparently numerologically, as to why he wants to add 42, because we know it's not just 42 generations from the time of Abraham up into Christ. We know that there's people that are specifically omitted, and there's people that are specifically included for a purpose. But that doesn't mean that it's not an historical account. History is subjective. So everything that we're going to view in terms of history is going to be viewed through a lens of somebody. That's why we call it the gospel according to St. Matthew. It's one gospel. All four gospels are one gospel. There's not four different gospels, but it's the gospel according to St. Matthew, St. Luke, St. Mark, St. John, because it's from four different perspectives. And so finding like discrepancies or omissions or additions to in anything, whether it's genealogical or it's some other type of historical narrative, doesn't make a difference as to whether or not it's actually objectively, quote unquote, true. It's history. It's something that's told through a lens, through a perspective, and that's how that person saw it. And yeah, they highlight different things. Like Matthew's gospel is specifically written to a Jewish people to try and explain the messianic or Christocentric aspect of Christ, whereas somebody like St. John's gospel is really going to be harping on the divine aspect of Christ in a way that wasn't done in the other gospels. Anyway, I went off on a tangent, but yeah.
Well said. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah,
what do you guys think?
The evangelicals use this to add up their 6,000 plus years, and I agree with it. So I agree with it.
I don't not agree with it. I don't like people that are so like staunchly rigid. Like people that are like, no, those numbers are precise. Like they're really like rigid, and they like white knuckle their hands into a frenzy, and I'm like, yeah, it doesn't matter. Like to me, in that sense, I'm like, if it's a just an allegory for a longer length of time, or if it's a precise number, I think it's naive to put all your eggs in one basket, especially for like an extremely literal interpretation. But then again, it in my mind, it doesn't really matter so much. It's like, okay, I could have it either or.
One thing that I think about too with the numbers, in terms of, I know we're kind of getting off on a tangent, but I like the rabbit hole of the ages of people throughout the Old Testament, especially how you can see them dwindle down. And we obviously know that part of the significance of it is to show that over time things degrade, and as sin continues to have a stronghold in the world, we see that there's a continuous fall away from the perfect state of the Garden of Eden, where we go from immortality to more and more mortality, and it just keeps going from there. But I think that there's even more of a significance than just like to show that this person, because you could show that in other ways. You wouldn't have to appeal to somebody's age in order to show that things degrade over time. You can obviously see the wickedness of man continue to degrade as it goes all the way up to Genesis 6 with the flood, and then after the fact. But like the ages are significant for one reason or another. Like we can be sure that the ages of the people were put in there for a particular reason, whether or not it's one thing or it's a couple things. But if they wanted to, if it was just something, this is why I don't believe in the whole, well, it was just there to fill in the gaps because they didn't know the generations of people. So they just made up numbers for the age of these, for the ages of these people to explain it. Well, if that's the case, it's probably easier to just make up a bunch of names and put it in the genealogy than it is to be like, this person lived to be almost 1,000 years old.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like, if you're trying to convince somebody that a genealogy is legit, why the heck are you going to tell them that somebody lived to be almost 1,000 years old? Rather than just being like, no, he begot.
Propensity to exaggerate things. I thought it was just like, yo,
yeah, but I think this. I think it's more than hyperbole, though. I don't think that that's something that is like just being hyperbolic for the sake of being, because when they say something that is hyperbolic, it's usually more in a vague sense. You wouldn't say 937 years old. Again, you'd appeal to something like they lived to be 1,000 years old, a number that again means something like complete or a really long time. So you see numbers like 1,000, that means that doesn't actually literally mean 1,000. So if you're trying to convey that, there's other Hebraic numbers that you could have appealed to that ancient people would have looked at and been like, yes, clearly this is not literal. This is something that's supposed to be taken as a type or a figure to convey some other kind of meaning. So just like in Revelation, when you see the 1,000-year reign of Christ, we know from other contexts in the Old Testament that is not talking about a literal 1,000 years. It's talking about it's talking about an extended period of time. So if you're trying to appeal to that for somebody's lifespan, don't use a very specific number that has no Hebraic numerological significance. Just use a number that is actually well-rounded, like 1,000 or 777 or whatever. Why would you use something like 937 years or 720 years or whatever? These numbers don't have significance in and of themselves to where they would just be appealing to some sort of hyperbolic kind of statement. I don't think personally anyhow, but that's my opinion.
The only way I would push back is, dude, when like in Revelation, when Mary flees into the wilderness, they say, in which to be nourished for 1,260 days. It's like, that's a seemingly random number, isn't it? Or is there some kind of deeper, and I'm sorry to go to Revelation.
Well, that's the 3.5 years. So that's showing that when you see like that number specifically equals out to half of 7, which of course is to show that this is not in its fullness yet. This is not the zenith of the event. This is something that is like a stopping point along the way of the zenith of that event, which is why that you would have that significance. And then also, so I mean, it sounds like a really specific number, but it is. But that number is numerologically significant. That's something that is not just a random number. That's a number that actually equals out to another, a times and time and a half. Right. So that's where that comes from. Where did we leave off?
Verse 17.
Revelation. We were at just finishing up Revelation. Right?
Yeah. Okay. So now the birth of Jesus Christ took place in this way. When his mother Mary had been betrothed to Joseph, before they came, you guys are going to have some good comments, I'm sure, about this joint. It took place in this way. When his mother Mary had been betrothed to Joseph, before they came together, she was found to be with child of the Holy Spirit, and her husband Joseph, being a just man and unwilling to put her to shame, resolved to send her away quietly. But as he considered this, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream, saying, Joseph, son of David, do not fear to take Mary, your wife, for that which is conceived in her is of the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and his name shall be called Emmanuel, which means God with us. When Joseph woke from sleep, he did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. He took his wife, but knew her not until she had borne a son, and he called his name Jesus. Okay.
For the sake of continuity, I'm going to read the 17th verse, Kieran, because you skipped that one.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I skip that?
Come on, man. If people are paying attention to this, they're going to want the whole thing. They don't want some abridged, sloppy ortho version that you're giving them.
This is the generation line, right? The
Yes.
14 generations?
Yeah.
Yeah, I read that.
He read it.
No, you read up to the who's called Christ.
No, he read the 14. He did a whole rant about the number 14 because he read that verse.
Yeah, remember? We just had a
No.
whole discussion on the 14 generations.
Don't remember.
Go back
And listen to it.
check the receipts.
But so question, how old was Mary? How old was Mary when this happened to her?
Probably like 14 or 15.
Yeah, okay.
In our tradition,
Okay.
we believe that Mary was a dedicated virgin at the temple. Because the word parthenos, I mean, obviously specifically means virgin.
We believe that too,
Greek,
don't we?
which
that's the Catholic
probably.
tradition. That's the Catholic tradition. That's the apostolic tradition. For sure.
Yeah. And so we believe in our tradition, obviously. And the text doesn't get you there. Like, you can't get there from the text, but that's okay.
We're not dogmatically bound to believe that, but I think it's common sense.
No. Yeah. So there's so many things, and I don't know. You guys start somewhere, because this.
What do you think about? What do you think about if I heard in one source they said the angel came to her when she was 12, so birthing Jesus when she was 13?
I don't have a problem with it.
I mean, it wouldn't be uncommon.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yep.
I mean, basically, what was being looked for in terms, like, you're selling is such a whatever, but you're marrying your daughter off. I mean, when they come into their menstruation, like that's when it was typically done.
Yeah,
that was very common. Yep. So I don't have a problem with that at all. Which also makes sense, because this would have been the reason why we believe that she was betrothed to Joseph, which is really more like, people get a misunderstanding. We can talk about betrothal, but the reason why we believe in the Orthodox Church that she was betrothed to Joseph was because she had to leave the temple while she was in childbearing years because of menstruating. And of course, with the laws of the Levitical, the Levitical laws, you can't be in the temple when you have any kind of blood flow. So for Mary to be a dedicated virgin at the temple, obviously the plan was for her to leave after having been there from the age of 2 to 3 or whatever it was, up until the time that she started menstruating, and then coming back after the fact, after having gone through menopause. And then, because you see most of the temple virgins, like we know throughout history, and through extra biblical sources and Second Temple Jewish literature, and the way that it's talked about, is that a lot of the people that were dedicated virgins in the temple were older women who were widowed, or women that were widowed that decided not to get married, because to be widowed in a society like first century Israel was basically to be homeless or a prostitute or something like that, because you have no legal recourse for anything. So why not go to the temple and dedicate yourself to the Lord, because then at least you'll be in the house of God and you'll be protected somewhat. So for Mary to be there as a dedicated virgin was not entirely, it wasn't uncommon, but also, like, her situation was a bit unique because she was there, then she had to leave, and the plan ostensibly was to come back to the temple to be dedicated. So, yeah.
I just want to say quickly, my friend Nugloff's in the live chat. Hello to you. And our friend Rebecca from Bread of Life is in the live chat. She says hello. Good to see you.
Oh, Rebecca, you got to join sometime, dude.
Yeah, I let her know.
What did she say?
I let her know. She said, good to see you all. So I said, I hope you join in every other Saturday for Bible study, because Aidan's going to be nursing. So I know, Rebecca, you're busy and you probably can't make it, but if you pop in once in a while, at least, it would be fun to have a Protestant on the panel, because we got 3 Catholics and an Orthodox here, Greek Orthodox, and it'd be fun to have someone who's not part of the apostolic tradition to just give another perspective on these Bible verses. I know you have a lot to say, Rebecca, and we love you, so it would be nice to have some feminine energy in the group too. So yeah, nice to see you.
Definitely. I second it.
What, if anyone doesn't have anything else to say, what was it that you found controversial about this, Kieran? Because you were sort of cringing, thinking, "Uh-oh, the Catholics are going to come at me for one of these verses here."
Oh, no. I wasn't saying in terms of like actually, this is where we would share a ton of commonality.
Okay.
I mean, there's almost nothing, there's nothing disagreeable in here for us. It's just that the passage is so rich with so many different rabbit holes that you can go down.
I see. Okay.
Like even something as simple as what is betrothal, right? Because like you will get this idea from certain people that like you can kind of almost caricaturize betrothal as something that's like akin to engagement today, which is not the case at all. Like betrothal is the first half of the legal process of marriage. It actually is in fact the entirety of the legal proceedings of a marriage. So when you're betrothed to somebody, you're actually married. And like I said before, we believe in the Orthodox Church that Mary was given to betrothal to Joseph so that he could take care of her, him being a widower. And she would have now legal recourse and somebody to look after her. Because again, as a woman in this society that is basically on her own, what are you going to do? You have to be married in order to have any kind of support or legal recourse for anything, even because you can't work, you can't do any of that stuff. So Joseph is there more as a protector, we think. And so betrothal, though, this is why it's important when Joseph finds out that she's conceived a child, because the law actually demands that, okay, not only should she, be divorced, should she be handed a writ of divorce, but she should actually be stoned, technically. But Joseph shows that he's above the law, that his love and mercy transcends the law, and it fills it to overflowing. But also, it does show the importance that there was actual legal recourse that had to happen in order for that betrothal to be broken off, because it says that he what's he say? He resolved to send her away quietly. That translation doesn't necessarily get at it, but it does fine enough. But some of the other translations talk about how like he set in motion to put her away quietly, meaning like, okay, we're gonna, because a dowry's already been given at this point, supposedly. Legal documents would have been signed at this point to say that they're married. The only thing that's left at this point that actually makes the marriage quote unquote complete is the consummation and the festival of the marriage. So that's the only thing that is left off. And of course, we believe as Orthodox and Catholics that consummation did not happen, but it does not mean that they were legally not married. They were married. So
well, probably not living together, right? Yeah. Or you're saying with betrothal, they could live together right away?
So betrothal typically, though, it was a time period of preparation. So they wouldn't have been living together in all cases. Yeah. I don't know the ins and outs. I'm not, obviously, I don't know the ins and outs of it. But right. Typically, this is a time period for instance, for the man to get prepared to, build a house or whatever for them to live in, to get his ducks in a row. This was a time for the woman to be prepared to know her husband in an intimate way and to prepare in that way, to gather up her loose ends with her family, to get ready to sever ties with her mother and her father, whatever kind of actions that required. So that was a time of preparation. So at this point in time, no, they probably were not living together while she was, not with child. And then after, obviously, we do know that they were together. It says that they lived together in Bethlehem, and it said, or that they lived together in Nazareth, and then it says that they went together to live in Egypt. So, obviously they lived together after the fact, but before Christ, no, I would think not. Anyhow. So
you want to attack chapter 2? You want to attack chapter 2?
Yeah, let's do it.
Because I basically told my wife, like, just whistle at me when you're ready, because we're gonna go bike to the beach. But I'm like, she basically takes a long time to get ready, so I said just whistle at me when you're ready. Nice. We'll just keep going until she whistles.
I do want to point out too, there is this contrast to Luke with Matthew that I realized today. So you have the fatherly lineage that happens in Matthew. You have the motherly lineage that happens in Luke. You have the two infancy narratives in both of those books. And the focus on the infancy narrative in Matthew seems to be more on Saint Joseph than it does on Mary, whereas in Luke it focuses on Mary rather than Saint Joseph. And so there seems to be, with those two books, like a more complete telling of the whole story, which is kind of neat, just because this is Joseph and all of his dreams, and then his interaction with the whole mystery of the incarnation, and it definitely flushes it out in a way that maybe we don't usually talk about it, but
well, I mean, it clears up all questions that could be leveled at it, right? Like, well, why would you name Joseph as his father if that's not really, if your claim is that he's divine, he doesn't have an earthly father, why name Joseph? This lineage is not it doesn't show that he came from the Davidic line, because it's showing that he's not actually blood related to David or whatever. But we know that that's not how that works in the ancient times. The way that if you're legally adopted by somebody, you are that person's heir. There's not a distinction between blood and not blood. They don't have that concept in ancient times. There's no distinction between the legal and the physiological connection between somebody, because they don't even have an understanding of genealogical ties like that. And then from the other end, you would say, well, why are you naming it through Mary? I mean, she's a girl, right? So why it's not legitimate through that, even if that is his blood, which she's a part of the same tribe. She comes down from the line of David too. But you can see, well, this covers both ends. So you can see how it serves both purposes, to shut up the people that would say that it's illegitimate to name Joseph because he's not his physical father, and it's illegitimate to name Mary because she's not his, because she's a woman, and you can't reckon the lineage through the girl. But it shows that both of those, exactly, it shows a fullness of that. So
and also, before we move on, Kieran, for anybody that would say, well, of course the Orthodox and the Catholic people conveniently don't talk about the line, but knew her not until she born a son. Do you want to a quick rebuttal against any kind of argument that they had sexual relations?
Yeah, real simple. Until does not mean that, it does not emphatically imply that after the fact that they did end up having sexual relations. We have plenty of passages in the scripture. I can't go through all of them, but just like a quick example would be something like Moses's body. In the book of Deuteronomy, it talks about in the second giving of the law, it says that Moses's body was he died, and his body was taken away by the angels, and it's not found until this day. Well, when they wrote that, it didn't mean that his body was found at that day. It means that up to this point, nobody found his body, and nobody has found it afterwards. Yep. There's so many examples like that. Even in the book of Matthew itself, I think it's at the last chapter, it says, and I will be with you until the end of the age. Does that mean that Christ isn't going to be with us after the end of the age comes? No, it just means that he's with us at that time, all the way up into. So the word is kind of synonymous with, like, until is until/to. So there's no connotation that defines this. And for any Protestant that, I'm not trying to bash, but like if any Protestant wants to say, well, this emphatically means that they did have sexual relations afterwards. Well, no, it doesn't, because Martin Luther didn't think it did. Ulrich Zwingli didn't think it did. John Calvin didn't think that it did. All the Protestant reformers believed in the perpetual virginity of Mary before, during, and after the time of Christ. And Martin Luther actually argued from this passage that the word until implies the exact opposite, that it does not mean that after, that typically when this word is used, which is such a tiny little word in Greek, when this word is typically used, it almost always is used as a way to point that it's an indefinite thing, meaning that it's not a cutoff point saying that until this point they did X, Y, and Z, but after this point they did the other thing. It's actually the opposite. It's until this point they didn't do that thing, and until afterwards. It shows in infinitude almost with whatever the subject matter is.
It's like
It's
the word
funny
even.
in Albanian. Oh, go ahead, David.
No, I was just going to say the same with the word even. Like in the Old Testament English translations, they use the word even in a very counterintuitive way. Like I'll pull up some examples of that. But go ahead, Nikola.
Yeah, I was gonna say in Albanian, the word until literally translates to up to now. It literally,
Right, exactly.
That's what it means. Up to now, you know.
Up to now, they have not had sex. Yeah,
yep.
that's exactly
and
right.
it's
That's
nothing for the future. It's just up to now. This is what this is. Yeah.
Well, I have a
there's
couple of
no-
examples. I have a couple of examples if the listeners are interested. And like I think you mentioned a couple of these, Kieran. And behold, I'm with you always until the end of the age, and not thereafter. Right? No. Michael,
right.
daughter of Saul, had no children. She had no children until the day of her death, and then after that, she had children.
Right.
Until I arrive, attend to reading, exhorting, and teaching. Must reign until he puts his enemies under his feet. My Father is at work until now, so I am at work, and it just goes on and on and on. There's so many examples.
Yep.
It's just,
many examples of this. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
and almost all of them show obviously that this does not imply afterwards the opposite being true. So
Yeah.
anyway, I almost forgot about that. And that's a good point. So now, when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him." When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet, and you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who will govern my people Israel." Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child. And when you have found him, bring me word that I too may come and worship him." When they had heard the king, that they went their way, and behold, the star which they had seen in the east went before them, till it came to rest over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh, and being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. Okay, who wants to go first on this section?
I was gonna say me if I could. I love it. The star of Bethlehem, and I feel like a lot of Catholic, teachers and all that, they kind of try to water it down a little and be like, well, that's not how stars move, and this is not how they didn't understand cosmology then. And I think this was completely literal, and they seen the most bright, beautiful star that literally led their path. So I take it literal, and yeah. Yeah.
It could have been a comet. It could have been any number of things, but to say that people
aliens.
Yeah. To say that people in the ancient times didn't understand astrology and stuff like that. It's like obviously there's a difference between astrology and astronomy, but like it's very significant. This star, like seeing this is something that basically shows in pagan culture, for instance, and even in Jewish culture, because it says that the stars will be for times and seasons and for signs and et cetera, in the book of Genesis. Like this equivocation between seeing a new star, this new astrological thing happening in the heavens, is to signify that somebody of real importance has been born here. So it's significant to show that, like, I mean, there are actual, like, severely credible people, astronomers and stuff, who theorize that this was actually maybe a comet back in like 4 BC or something like that. They could show that on this given day and on this given time that this astrological phenomenon happened, and it could be any number of contender things. The point is, from the Christian perspective, is that it's by no means scientifically something that's out of the realm of possibility. In fact, it's far the opposite. But from a theological perspective, it shows that again, this is another example of pagans seeing something, taking from their practice, which from Persia is some sort of type of Zoroastrianism or something like that, that even these Gentiles are being led to the glory of the kingdom of God, and they're being brought into the kingdom by first typifying what the rest of the Gentiles are going to do by coming and offering gifts to the Christ child, and then also worshiping him, which is just like unheard of. Even the people of Israel aren't doing this. But what's interesting for me most about this passage, and actually pretty much all of Jesus's life, is the reversal of Israel. It's a reversal of all the iniquities of Israel, and it's the cleansing and the sanctifying of all that's been corrupted in humankind. And you see it all the way from back in the time of Jesus. Like even when they fly into Egypt, there's a direct mirroring in a lot of the stuff. We didn't get there yet, but there's so many things that show that Christ is actually coming and he's righting all of the wrongs. The role that Israel was supposed to fulfill, the reason that Israel was set apart, is not because they were better or they were more holy or what have you. It was simply that God, that Yahweh was setting aside a people to preserve, to protect, to be a light to the nations, and to bring Christ down through that. And so where Israel fails, Christ succeeds. And it literally starts all the way from back in this passage. And then you have figures like Herod the king, who he directly mimics Pharaoh, even trying to kill the innocent children. We still haven't gotten to that, but yeah. What are your guys' thoughts?
Even being in the New Age world for so long, the Three Kings have always appealed to me because of just because of their mystical quality that they kind of carry with them, and they don't lose that as they find Jesus. They enhance it, and so they come in one direction and then they leave in another direction, which Kieran, your favorite person in the world, pointed this out, Bishop Barron. They come in through their path, they have an encounter with Christ, and then they leave on a different path, just like everybody.
No, that's a good
Jesus, which is really cool. And then the other thing,
broken clock is right twice a day. You know what I mean, man?
Yeah, it's true.
No, I'm just kidding.
I hate you. I hate
He's
that.
Fine.
The other thing is, you see,
hell is
Jesus
empty.
Takes
hell is
from
empty. Just kidding.
Jesus takes from the worst of the Jews. He takes the shepherds, he takes the poor Jews, and then he takes from the best of the Gentiles, the three kings, and just throws everything on its head. And then the Gentiles that come in honor Jesus with gold, frankincense, and myrrh. So the gold is what for his priesthood, I think I read. The frankincense is for the sacrificial aspect, and then the myrrh talks about our mortality, our death.
Yeah.
And so there's this really cool symbolic element with the whole thing. But
there's also a priest, prophet, king, that those three roles that all Christians play.
Plus also the names. I think the names of the three kings, and they have the same initials as Christus, Benedictus, something. I heard that in Mass around Christmas time, I think. So, you guys ever hear anything
one
about
of them
that?
is Balthazar, right?
What was that?
Yeah.
I don't know.
One of them is Balthazar. I remember that.
Yeah, we were given blessed chalk to write these initials above our door at home.
Nice.
Too, as well, which stands for, it's pretty cool.
I wanted to say,
man, I bet it all has a meaning, but
I wanted to say about the whole star thing and then science and all this sort of nonsense. I don't buy into flat Earth stuff, but there are Christians who, they go past where I'm at with the young Earth creationism, and they believe in the firmament and the dome and all these sorts of things. And I know Nikola is open to that, just at least open-minded about it. I don't know where you stand today, Nikola, but I wanted to hear your perspective, Nikola, in terms of trust the science and NASA and all the experts with astronomy and all this sort of thing. I think you're probably the most skeptical among us. So when you read about this star, you probably have a more magical or more
Yeah,
mystical
a little
interpretation
bit
of it.
tangible as well. Yeah.
So
Yeah, for sure.
you're leaning
I
more
would
that
just say,
way?
yeah, I'm leaning more towards the firmament is something, we don't know exactly what. The Bible explains it as this molten mirror, and it's like so I think it's something, and there's maybe some physicality to it. So I'm not sure exactly what the firmament is, but when it comes to like NASA and today's cosmology, I would just say like, I can't believe much of a word they say. I feel like they got the distances wrong of the stars, the sizes of them wrong, what they are wrong. So it's like I just can't believe. And to me, I link as the more I looked into what heliocentric model even teaches, it's like you can't help but link it to it's the same people that's telling us that evolution is true. And it's just the insignificance now of the earth, and all that out there is more magical even, and just it just totally to tear us further away. I believe from the truth.
I do want to say that I'm definitely leaning towards geocentrism. I want it to be true. I studied physics and I worked at the Canadian Space Agency. I've got a lot of prejudices to overcome when it comes to geocentrism, but we are the center of the universe in every way that matters.
Right.
But Aidan and Kieran, in terms of geocentrism, geostationary geocentrism, and these sorts of things, and of course the firmament, flat Earth, that's the far extreme. Where do you guys fall on that spectrum, Kieran and Aidan?
A side note, I think is it Robert Sungenis is a geocentrist?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've never looked into his stuff, but I know just from my Catholic days that he's a bright dude. So I wouldn't be surprised if he has some really interesting things to say about it. So maybe I'll check into that. I'm not tied to one or any type of cosmological model. I think that for sure what Nikola said, I don't trust anything NASA puts out. That's just my gut instinct. And I think that it's more than just a gut instinct. It's a gut instinct based upon the fact that they have lied so flagrantly about certain things. And so I don't trust them. I do think that there's I don't tie myself to flat Earth or anything like that. I'm not, like I said, I don't really care at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I think there's damaging parts that can come from both sides. The heliocentric / spherical model, and then also from the flat Earth model. One tells you basically that you're so insignificant that it gets you to doubt whether or not could we really be the only people that not only that God created, but what are the implications of other people being created? Does Christ have to come and incarnate for all of those other races? Do they need redemption? Have they sinned? Have they fallen? Space Trilogy by C.S. Lewis kind of gets into this question a lot. And it's sort of an experimental thought by C.S. Lewis to talk about what would it be like to witness another creation account on a different planet, which is really interesting. I like to entertain that idea, but I personally don't prefer that. I would like to think that we are the only people that have been made in the image of God. We are the only people that have been given this, this charism. So for me, again, I'm not tied to anything, but my gut instinct would be to tell me that we are the only people that have been made in the image of God, and that whether or not we're alone, quote unquote, in this universe, whatever else is there is interdimensional rather than spatial and extraterrestrial, because you get into all those types of questions. And also, I don't think the nature of the stars, like Nikola said, I don't think the nature of the stars and the planets and stuff are what we're told they are either. It's actually weird. Like you can see certain really high powered telescopes and stuff, people that buy them, like different YouTubers and stuff like that. You got to take everything with a grain of salt, but it is interesting to see how different luminaries, they interact. Like when you get really close and zoom up to them, it almost underwater, the way that the light bends and the way that it literally looks like they're in water. It's pretty nuts. The firmament, in terms of that, I don't really know. That could be the Van Allen radiation belt for all I know. I really don't have an opinion on it, but I do know that Genesis says that the firmament was open, the floodgates were open from the depths and from above. And so I do have a tendency to believe that, like, I believe more too in portals and dimensional wormholes and stuff like that can take people to different dimensions and stuff like that. So why are so many ancient civilizations, why do they have these supposed wormholes and stargates and stuff like that? Like, these are things that could all have ties to the Bible. I don't know. It's fun to think about, but at the end of the day, I think symbolically what matters the most is that is really what you have to pull out of Scripture. Like, whether or not certain things are literal or not, you can go down a rabbit hole, but I don't personally think it could necessarily save your soul or whatever. And then on the flat earth side, if you get on that side, it's dangerous to think that we're the only people in creation, or that we're so insignificant that God doesn't care about us and we're really small and we're on a speck of dust and blah, blah, blah. I think that can be dangerous spiritually, but I also think it can be really dangerous spiritually to think about flat earth in such a degree, to think that if flat earth is not true, then the Bible is not true. Because I do know a lot of people on the internet, albeit that have been brought to Christianity based upon flat earth rather than the other way around. And I think it misses the point entirely. I think it totally misses the point. And I think that if you're putting all of your eggs in that basket, well, dude, like, when you find out that's not true, are you gonna disavow Christ because flat earth isn't true? Like, come on.
The shape, even the shape. That's why. Yeah, exactly. I'm with you there. The shape truly don't matter. It's just the point of the top guys are lying and trying to deceive. That's all. Satan's working through them, and they're trying to deceive. Satan has a plan, right? And I feel he's going to use the learning of cosmology and to trick us, and also I believe there's no little green aliens on another planet, right? With building a ship and coming our way, and they're fallen angels. That's all. It's spiritual. Demons, and that's what they are. Whatever people have seen and even been abducted, it's just on a spiritual aspect.
Demonic, for sure 100%.
Yeah.
Hey, before just in case David ends up having to leave, I did want to just say that somebody should make mention about the fact that Mary is mentioned in this account of the wise men, but Joseph is not.
So Mary is mentioned for the wise men.
But Mary is mentioned, and this, I think this. Well, yeah, because in our Mariology, in the shared Mariology, we believe Mary as queen, right? And so we affirm that, but people get really bent out of shape because you're like, people get bent out of shape by it because it's like, well, there is no queen in heaven. The queen of heaven is Ishtar or something like that you read about in one of the other Old Testament books or whatever. But this comes directly from First and Second Kings or First and Second Kingdoms and Chronicles and stuff like that. Every time that the king is listed, it's always the mother that's listed along with the king.
Right.
And
there's a corresponding psalm to that too. I forget what the psalm is, but the queen.
Oh, there's a couple, I believe. There's
the queen.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you're good. No, but back to the flat Earth thing. I was gonna say, if I just furrow my brow enough and I shake my head when you guys are talking, like, that's my opinion. Yes. But no, I have.
Good.
I know people that really, really put stock in the whole flat earth thing, and they're like, but see, it means they're lying to us. And it's like, there's a naivety behind that in one sense, where it's like, well, yeah, of course they're lying to us, but like, who cares what the content of the lie is? So it's so much like for you personally. Now for other people, sure, like, that's a big deal, but like, a lot of the people that would talk about the flat earth stuff, it's like, what's your prayer life like? What's your relationship with Jesus like? Like, are you praying every day? Are you do you have an active relationship with God? Do you have an active relationship with the church and with the sacraments? And if the answer is no, because I'm like too busy clickety clacking away, look at these different conspiracies, well then, I mean, Satan's beating you right then and right there, because
that's right.
you're not doing the things that you should be doing, because it's a works-based religion.
I agree with you.
No, but I mean,
Yeah,
you're
no,
not doing the
100%.
things that you
And
should
I
be
would
doing.
say majority of flat earthers have gone to that level because through this, again, not the shape of the earth, it's just they discovered that, wow, that there's a lot of lies in the world and the reality of Satan. So that was so heavy for them,
Right.
that's what they're running with completely now. And it brought fear and a little bit of paranoia and all that. So it's definitely hard to take and listen to a flat earther, right? Seriously, because they're kind of on on not so good level, so they definitely need to, you're right, if they don't have the prayer life and close to God, then they're on the wrong track for sure.
Yeah, just one last thing. One
I
last
think-
thing to say, Aidan. Sorry, from my part, is that a lot of people make fun of Christians and religious people generally, and they'll say like, "Oh, well, there used to be the God of thunder and the God of rain and all these sorts of things." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's the God I worship. My God is the God of thunder, the God of rain, the God of sunshine. It's the God of everything." And when the rains fall and when the thunder strikes, I see God and his angels in that, right? It's not a superstitious,
Exactly.
it's not a naive, silly, childish attitude. It's like God is the source of everything, right?
Exactly.
And they were more in touch, like the Old Testament people were closer to the Garden of Eden. They were closer to God in many ways. Yes, they were rebellious. Yes, we know that. But the holy men of the Old Testament were better than us, smarter than us, brighter than us, and they were more in touch with nature than us. And, for people to trust these so-called experts today with their academic lies and manipulations, it's a joke. It's a really, really, really sad joke that they think they're so enlightened today. So that's just the capstone I wanted to put on this whole firmament.
Exactly.
Stuff.
Well,
yeah,
and also
we could talk about that forever.
Like Christology, or just the concept of Jesus being threaded throughout all of creation has been something that's fascinated me for a long time, and probably took root in Lev Delay's book on the invocation of the holy name of Jesus, and just the way that he talks about like all of nature singing that name back, and or like in Acts, in him we live and move and have our being, those things, and even Paul's borrowing from pagan culture or some kind of pagan scripture when he says that, and there's just something mystical and beautiful and transcendent thinking about Jesus, living in everything but also transcending everything as well. And I don't know what that looks like. Like I can't pretend to have an understanding of what the universe looks like and how God holds it up in every single way, but it is definitely a lot of fun to use to spark good considerations and to inflame our love of God so we can improve our relationship with him. So if sure, like the flat earth stuff or like just the stuff that you're doing there like inflames your heart and makes you love Jesus more, just kind of like going into those areas, experimentally, if they inspire prayer and love and all these other things, just keep going with them. And eventually it just lifts off of whatever the content is and just firmly, you're ended up planted in God himself and, or herself. And then whatever got you there doesn't really matter in the first place anyway, because it all just
it has to serve that. It has to serve God and glorify God. I just want to give a shout out to Christopher Rice. He's my friend and guest. I'm going to have him on again tomorrow. Really nice non-apostolic Christian. And I invited him if he wants to join in the Bible study. If you're not there, Aidan, next Saturday, it would be cool to have Christopher Rice on. Real sweet guy. And he's in love with Christ.
Can you stop giving my position away to
I love that you opted out of every other Saturday. It's amazing. So, yeah, I just want to say one more thing. I'm just being cruel to you, Aidan. Just don't take it personally.
I've noticed. I feel alienated. I feel.
So I want to say one thing about St. Augustine, the city of God. One of my favorite parts of that is where he talks about all the pagan gods, and he says, yes, this is our God, this is our God, the God of fertility, the God of agriculture, the God of, he goes through a whole pantheon of the Greco-Roman gods, and he's just taking it all for our one true God. So,
Nice.
on that note, I'll let Kieran polish off the chapter, and then we're going to have to wrap things up, I think.
Yep.
All right. Verse 13, now when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, rise, take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt and remain there till I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him. And he rose and took the child and his mother by night and departed to Egypt and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet, out of Egypt have I called my son. Then Herod, when he saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, was in a furious rage, and he sent and killed all the male children in Bethlehem and in all that region who were 2 years old or under, according to the time which he had ascertained from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what was spoken by the prophet Jeremiah. A voice was heard in Ramah, wailing and loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be consoled because they were no more. But when Herod died, angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, rise, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who sought the child's life are dead. And he rose and took the child and his mother and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus reigned over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there, and being warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee, and he went and dwelt in a city called Nazareth, that what was spoken by the prophets might be fulfilled. He shall be called a Nazarene. Just real quick, some people, I know if we're talking about atheists again, we'll look at some of these Old Testament prophecies, and if you go and read all these prophecies in the context, of course, the prophecy is not talking specifically at that point in time in its original context about Christ or what's happening to Christ, etc. We do have an understanding and Protestants have this too. This is just a basic hermeneutical understanding of how to interpret Old Testament prophecy. Is something that a lot of Protestants will call double fulfillment, but that we like to call, at least, is yes, it is double fulfillment, but there's a fulfillment in a general sense, which means filled to overflowing. So you have a microcosmic fulfillment of whatever Old Testament prophecy it might be. Whether one of the first prophecies Matthew brings out, for instance, is in Isaiah chapter 7, when he says that a young woman or a virgin, the word alma can mean either or in Hebrew, is going to give birth to a son, and before he knows good or evil, you will be delivered from the Ephraimites or Israel and the Syrian Empire, and you shall call his name Emmanuel, meaning God with us. In that specific context, is talking about a young woman at that time during the Syro-Ephraimite war, coming against the land of Judah and attacking it, and King Ahaz being given this prophecy of like, here's the sign to you, here's the down payment, here's the sign that's going to show you that I will deliver you. You're going to see this child born by this virgin, maiden, whoever this is, and his name's going to be Emmanuel, and before he knows good or evil, you will be delivered. So it's talking specifically about that. Matthew is not saying that when Isaiah is saying this to King Ahaz, that this is about Christ specifically at that point in time. There is a fulfillment or a filling to overflowing that comes to fruition, where Matthew's trying to draw your attention to something in the past in the Old Testament, to put the fulfillment to it, to highlight this is what's going on with Christ as it pertains to these other microcosmic biblical events in the Old Testament. And so just, chapter and verse is not a thing when Matthew's writing the Gospels. So what ancient writers would do if they're referring to scriptures is they would give you a snippet of that scripture, expecting the person who's reading it to know, okay, he's talking about this part of Isaiah. Let me go back to Isaiah and read from the scroll that has no delineation between chapter, verse, etc. And you're supposed to get from that what the context of the full meaning is. And in the escape to Egypt, he does it a couple times, where he does a couple of these prophecies. He talks about Ramah and the wailing and the loud lamentation, etc. Well, this is about the Babylonian captivity. This is not specifically about that, but it's showing that Herod is imitating Pharaoh. He's imitating the Babylonian Empire. The fulfillment is coming about, and this is a reversal again. This is Christ doing what was done, where God brings them out of Egypt to save the firstborn children. Well, now God's saying Israel is so bad, they're just like Egypt, that now instead of Christ leaving Egypt to to flee into safety into the land of Canaan, which then becomes Israel, he actually has to leave the land of Israel and flee to Egypt for safety and security. And it's showing, Matthew is pointing to this to show, like, look, this is how bad it's gotten. This dude is insane. He's killing all of these kids. This is exactly like Pharaoh. And side note, this is actually why we believe
worse
that
than Pharaoh in one sense, because God is the one who kills the firstborn in Egypt, whereas Pharaoh is the one, Herod is the one killing the children in Israel. So
even in Exodus though too, remember Pharaoh being like, hey, midwives, abort these children. And then when he basically says this to the to the midwives or whatever, and they say, well, these Israelite women, they're really hardy. We can't tell, because without getting gross, they had ways to check and see if it was a male or a female in the womb. Obviously without sonograms. So they would do something, and basically they Pharaoh says to these midwives, when you go to the Israelite women, check while they're pregnant if this is a male or a female. If it's a male, abort the kid. But they don't want to do that. And then so he says, okay, well, just any male that comes out of the womb, just throw it to the crocs. So this is showing Herod's doing the same exact thing, and it's showing that just as Pharaoh, this was the straw that broke the camel's back. Basically, was the killing of the firstborn. And so Herod is now doing the same thing. But as a side note, in the Orthodox Church, in our tradition, this is actually what we believe when Jesus will reference it later, but he talks about the killing of the prophets all the way up into Zechariah, which is, we believe that it's the Zechariah of John, John the Baptist, John the Forerunner, his father. We believe that this is why John had to go out into live in the wilderness, because his parents were killed and were martyred on his behalf, because he would have been one of the children at this time who would have been killed by Herod the king.
Oh yeah,
he would have fallen into this camp. Yeah, because he was living in that region, and because he was under 2 years old. So that's why we believe that John was driven out into the wilderness as well. It obviously doesn't say that in the text, but that's
Does anybody else
well-rounded view
and get violently angry at the
read the what?
Does anybody else read this and get violently angry at the childish actions of Herod and think like what a whiny crybaby? I want to be king. Let's kill babies. That's all I can picture in my head. But I know it's obviously not quite.
Yeah, and
but I just see a petulant child that's struggling for power, and that is just more than okay with destroying life, tons and tons of life, just to support that. And not only that, but obviously he didn't live long after that had happened, because we have the story of Jesus in the temple at 12 years old, and so he was obviously back in Israel prior to 12. So what, Herod lives another 10 years? It's was it worth it?
And historically we can show that people are generally pretty aware of the fact that Herod the Great probably died somewhere around 6 AD or something like that, or somewhere between 6 and 10 or something like that. So Christ would have been probably around 6 to 10 years old or something like that, 6 to 12 years old when he came back to the land or whatever. So yeah,
his power was being threatened. His power and his glory was being threatened, so he was willing to do anything.
Yeah, and it shows too. It's another thing, just like the myrrh, you know, which is used to anoint dead bodies and stuff. This is another foreshadowing. Basically, this is like Act 1 of Christ being continuously over and over again through either the narrative or through Christ Himself saying, like, "Hey, this is the plan of salvation. This is the plan of salvation. Is for me to go and die." The wickedness of Israel is such that if they had the chance, and Herod speaking on their behalf, even as somebody who's an Arab and not really even a Jew, this is somebody who, on Israel's behalf, is representative of the fact that Israel's wickedness had been so bad at this point that had they been able to kill Christ right out of the womb, that they would have done it rather than waiting the 30 plus years for him to be crucified on the cross through the Roman government. And there's so many things that go into the narrative of Christ and his conquering of death and how that gets played out through the scriptures, but just over and over and over and over again, the scriptures show two things. It shows the reversal of Israel, you know, failing and Christ coming and setting it aright. And it shows also the plan for salvation, which includes, but is not limited to, the death of Christ and then ultimately his resurrection, ascension, enthronement, etc. So like, it just shows over and over again, like, yeah, Christ is going to die. Like, and this is one of the perfect passages of it. There's so much. I mean,
I want to emphasize the mystery of iniquity and pride versus humility, and the first shall be last, the last shall be first. And if you humble yourself, you'll be exalted, and these sorts of ideas, which are, to me, central to Christianity. And if I think about Pharaoh, if I think about King Herod, if I think about the quote-unquote bad guys in Old and New Testament, if they had humbled themselves and just said, "Oh God, is this what you want? Do you want me to step back and let, you know, this child that's born in Bethlehem to be king? Is that what you want, God?" If he just humbled himself, like, what was Herod doing? Did Herod believe in the pantheon of the Greco-Roman gods, or what did he believe? Like, could he just take some quiet time and humble himself and say, "Look, the wise man told me that there's this King of Kings coming. Like, what does that mean for me and my rule? Like, can I serve this higher king, or what's going on? Like, have a dialogue with his higher power. Like, who did he worship? What was his situation? Same thing with Pharaoh. Like, what was his higher power? He seemed to recognize that the one true God was God, and he at one point repented, and, you know, he just kept hardening his heart. So I want to focus on the mystery of iniquity and pride versus humility. What do you guys think is going on? Because this is the fundamental option that we all face day to day. Am I going to accept God's reality, or am I going to try to force my fantasy onto reality? That's how I see each one of these stories in the Bible. It's like they're two sides. Choose wisely. We already know the outcome. We know who wins in the end. So it's just mind-boggling that you would side with the opposition.
Poorly. I was just quoting Indiana Jones.
Oh, that's a good. Oh, classic. I was waiting for you to quote Indiana Jones. Okay, go ahead.
Well, so David, like what you're talking about, that I think that kind of introspection and humility takes repeated attempts and like a habit of that. So like you see somebody like Herod, and his actions clearly demonstrate that that's not a line of thinking that he takes often, if at all, and maybe not ever. Maybe as a young man, but was quickly corrupted. So like to all of a sudden say like I should sit down and really think about this doesn't seem to make any sense, and is not in line with the rest of his character. And I know that the Bible talks about idol making quite a bit, but it seems that somebody like Herod, who I can't remember where I read it, I don't know if it was in the RSV Catholic Study Bible or the Word on Fire Bible, but he was his own. He had his own belief. He was not Jewish. He was king of the Jews, appointed by the Roman government. And he had his own faith or whatever.
Spirituality
maybe. But even still, I don't even know if he did. But there's a prophecy there's an old Jewish prophecy about the star and about it crushing whatever his line was, or making it somehow invalid. I can't remember the exact quote. So he
was that Psalm 109 or something?
Let me see if I can find it real quick. But
anyway, yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to get you off on a tangent. I know one of the Psalms talks about the star.
It's interesting because, it does like really point out his character.
Christopher Rice says in the live chat that Herod was his own god, and that's spot on. That's exactly the point. Like, those are the two religions, love of self unto contempt of God, or love of God unto contempt of self, as St. Augustine says in the
It also shows that like Herod,
he was talking
about humility.
He was an Edomite. Okay.
Yeah. Sure. So the star
you're talking about
prophecy.
Go ahead.
Oh, Kieran, I'm talking over you.
No, I was just going to say the one thing was, so David was saying basically, like, if he would have just said, like, oh, okay, God, do you want me to worship him? Is he actually the king? Like, showed that modicum of humility to just kind of say, well, I could be wrong about this. It shows that the mystery of iniquity and the hardening of the heart and the kind of obstinance that a lot of us have a lot of the time, in that Herod himself knows that humility is actually what he needs, when he plays dumb and says, well, tell me where he's at so I can go and worship him. I will also join you in that. Totally not going to kill him. Totally not going to kill him. I am also going to worship him.
Be quiet.
So just let me know where he's at. Yeah. So it's like, you can see that there's something a lot deeper and iniquitous in Herod himself. It's not just a matter of like, I'm having a lapse of judgment here. And Herod, obviously, being an Edomite, being somebody that's technically seen as an outsider, like, you have the different groups and sects of Judaism that look at Herod and they're like, this dude ain't our king. Like, he's already dealing with, like, that's one of the reasons why he undertook the project of rebuilding the temple, was to like, oh, this is going to get me a lot of support from the people that reject me as their king because I'm an Edomite. And so this is showing, like, okay, so let me get on these people's side. So he's already got a ton of insecurity going into this thing. He's basically a pawn for the Roman government to keep the people in line so that the Roman government can suck the resources out of the land. And okay, you can be king of the people over here, but we don't really care about them, because the people that, you guys aren't even Roman citizens. You're basically just cattle or worse. Deal with them. And these cattle are rejecting Herod time and time again. The Pharisees kind of only do it to survive, to have a relationship with him. But most Jews are like, no, this guy ain't our king. So you have that. And then to actually hear that, imagine being in that position where you're just vying for love and affection and attention from other people, to ostensibly be worshipped as a god yourself, like this Christopher fellow is saying. And Pharaoh literally believed he was God incarnate. So, I mean, that he is the instantiation of Ra. So, I mean, there is an element of that, which same goes for Augustus Caesar. There's one thing you couldn't call yourself. You couldn't call yourself a king in Roman civilization. That's why Caesar didn't call himself a king, but he called himself God in flesh. That's literally where you get that from. So we have these people that are actually worshiping themselves. Now imagine thinking you're a god, that you're privy to this, and then having, no, actually there is somebody who's really the king here, and now everything is like, okay, so I don't have people's love and attention, I don't have any of that, and I'm being told that somebody's coming to replace me.
I'm getting ratioed by the God man.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So
yeah.
What's Nikola think?
He was just being a douche.
Yeah, no, I just could imagine it. He's like looking at all his money and his power and his chair. He's like, I'm not giving this up for nothing. That's all, for nothing.
Simple.
Yeah,
and it also goes into show that, like, in the new age to come, in the new heavens and new earth, the way that we're going to see Christ as king is going to be in a way that we're going to see him in all of his glory, right? But it also shows, this is another instance, this is one of the first instances where if Herod understood what Christ meant by coming to be the king of Israel in his incarnation, he probably would have been like, oh, okay, go ahead, do your thing. because Christ does not mean king the way that most people understand king to mean. And that's going to be a running theme throughout all of the Gospels, where Christ says, you know, I am the King of Kings, or I am the Lord of Lords. You're going to see all these declarations, and what he means, people are thinking he's going to ride in on a white horse and do all these kingly things. I mean, that's where the gospel idea comes from. Here's my list, the gospel, the evangelium, which just means, you know, this is pronounced before the king. It's his list of all of his battle conquerings and the people that he's won over, and the slayer of 7 demons, and et cetera, where Christ means this gospel is the victory over death itself. And so it just shows that the lack of spirituality, of spiritual understanding, like the Holy Spirit enlightenment for not only the apostles, but for people who are actually wicked, just shows that they have a fundamental misunderstanding of what Christ means when he comes to say that I am the Christos, I am the chrismed one, the anointed one. It doesn't mean what they think it means. And Herod, it's like, dude, you're fighting against something that you don't even understand, like at all, fundamentally, at all.
Yeah, my wife did whistle, so we have to wrap it up very quickly here. But Aidan, I want to hear your last thought there.
Sorry, Aidan, I cut you off. Bro.
No, you're good. I'm just gonna read what this says, just real quick. So it says the star recalls the Old Testament prophecy about the Messiah. In Numbers 24:17, Balaam predicted, a star shall come forth out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel. Herod the Edomite was troubled, in quotes, that the same oracle foretold disaster for his family, in quotes. Edom shall be dispersed, Numbers 24:18. But like the one listener said, he was his own God. In New Age spirituality, in anything pagan, that's all anything ever devolves down to, is that they're worshiping somebody. But it just so happens that everything they want, money, power, and illicit sex, those are, you know, I share those interests. And it's like, that's really funny how your God doesn't call you to any higher convictions and lets you indulge in everything. So essentially their God is always going to be themselves. So, you know, that's why nobody wants to be a Christian and nobody wants to follow Jesus, because, you know, it's not a faith of convenience.
Yeah, when you worship the license to sin, you're worshiping your sin. There's no distinction to be made whatsoever.
Wow.
Amazing, guys. So that was a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to next week when Aidan's not going to be here. Just kidding. Just kidding. I hope you can make it every week.
No, it's good.
I hope you can make it every week. If you quit your job, then just tell them something more important came up. But I do have to go because my wife's whistling.
Something suddenly came up.
But we'll do this again next Saturday. I'll be here. And I'm pretty sure Kieran and Nikola will be here, and maybe
you should just do it at a later time, David, so I can join in.
Sure. When do you want to do it? Saturday evening? That works for me. Saturday evening works for me. Does that work for you guys?
I'll keep y'all posted. I don't know if that's going to work for me.
Probably.
Honest.
Yeah, probably not.
Mornings are
Mornings are
typically better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well then, let's do it at 4 a.m.
I can't. Yeah, because it's either church or Adrian and I are doing something.
No, that's fine. Just
on any given Saturday.
I'll do every other week. And
what about Sunday? Sunday afternoons?
Next weekend is Sunday afternoon. So that's the day before my birthday. So I'm sure we're going to be doing something on. That's the other thing. This weekend, or this coming weekend, is going to be my birthday weekend. So it's going to depend on like what we're doing for that.
And it's all about you.
But it's all
sure about you.
It's all about me. Yeah.
Well, you only turned 21.
Some days I do.
So.
I don't know if you know this, but I'm a pretty important guy. So
kind of a big deal. Yeah, kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
Well, so just do Saturday, and then just have somebody else come on, and then that way I can watch. But just let me know what the verses are covered, so I can at least just follow it for the week. And
we're just going to continue
for whatever the follow up is. I can just jump in because
it's awesome. I just want to say this too before you guys leave. It was awesome. Like I really enjoyed. I think we'll get more into the flow of things as it goes along. I think this cursory system that we have is really good, and I love having people that are more mature Christians than myself to talk about this stuff, because you guys ask like spiritual questions and get to the actual heart of the issue. I have a tendency to stick into history and the minutia of that kind of stuff, but it's cool to be probed in a way like where we talk about the actual application of Scripture, because we have to maintain that the Scriptures were written, to a specific people, but that they were written for us and they were given to us to be able to apply to our lives. And I love hearing y'all's take on everything.
Yeah,
so
well,
it's gonna be good,
that's exciting. That's exciting. The emphasis that I put, the emphasis that Nikola puts, the emphasis that you put, or that your brother Aidan puts, they're all slightly different, because we like, I'm a hammer, so everything I see is a nail. You're a screwdriver, everything you see is a screw. And it's just interesting to see what we all bring to the table in terms of the lens, because you talked about history is seen through a lens. And psychologically, we all have our upbringing, we all have our predispositions, and we bring to bear the same set of lenses on to everything, absolutely everything, including religion and faith in the Bible and everything else, right? So it's very interesting to have that revealed, and I know where my emphasis usually lies, and it's fun to discover with you guys where your emphasis ultimately lies, and what you keep coming back to a certain perspective on the same, different applications, but the same perspective that's being brought to bear on every question in the Scripture. So that's exciting.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, guys.
Love you
guys.
lots. Love you lots.
All right, love you guys.
Let's give a shout out to Matthew Murdoch.
Really
Let's
cool,
hope he
man.
comes on one day. Matthew Murdoch might come on.
That's right. I love Matthew.
Yes.
Get
And
Mr.
please-
Murdoch on.
Please, what?
Yeah, come on, dude.
Aidan?
Just please come on and clarify how you're doing and hang out with us and trash talk Aidan and yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give the last word to Aidan.
Hate all of you.
Love you guys. Love you guys. We'll talk soon, okay?
Okay,
Love you.
God bless.
All right, see you guys. Have a good weekend.
Love you. Bye.
God bless. Bye.
Bye.